Mr. Speaker, this year represents the third year of the COVID pandemic, and we begin with a plan to keep us safe and, Mr. Speaker, to help keep the country moving forward. Our guiding principle for the last 2 years has been to protect lives and, Mr. Speaker, to protect livelihoods, and that is exactly what we have done. Our confirmed cases, hospitalisations and deaths have been the lowest in the OECD for the past 2 years. We now have one of the most highly vaccinated populations in the world, with 94% of those aged 12 and over double vaccinated. And Mr. Speaker, 42% of our children have now had their first dose as well, and just in time for school. 1.6 million New Zealanders have already received their COVID-19 booster vaccination as well. And the fact that we have collectively worked together to look after one another's health, Mr. Speaker, that's also cushioned the blow to the economy. In fact, it's done more than that. Unemployment is at record lows. Record numbers of New Zealanders have moved off the main benefit and into work, and growth remains strong with record export prices for our dairy sector, and I acknowledge our primary producers and the role that they have played during this pandemic. And so to the team of 5 million who have made all of that possible, we say thank you. And we also say let's keep going, because we are not yet done. Omicron is the next challenge that we face, and it is, Mr. Speaker, a new and difficult phase of the pandemic, as New Zealanders prepare to encounter COVID-19 in a way that we have not yet to date, and at a scale we are not used to seeing in this country. But we do have the tools and a plan to get us through. Now, Mr. Speaker, that includes the COVID-19 protection framework, which uses public health measures to slow down the spread of Omicron, but still allows our businesses to open and to operate. It includes the vaccine campaign with a big focus on boosters, which has already seen more than half of our eligible population boosted. And it includes a specific plan for each stage of the Omicron outbreak on how we'll manage contacts, increases in testing, including how we'll use the 180 million rapid antigen tests we have ordered, and how we'll support critical services to continue operating when their workers may have COVID in their households. Mr. Speaker, no country is immune from Omicron's disruption, but we are working hard to avoid the worst of it, and we are better prepared than most. Mr. Speaker, I have a really important message, though, for all New Zealanders. Boosters are our strongest weapon at this point. Every booster, it strengthens our immunity, and it takes pressure, importantly, off our health system. So, to every New Zealander, if you are eligible, please go and get boosted today. It is the most significant thing that you can do to protect your family, your friends, those hard-working nurses, doctors, paramedics, and all of our dedicated health workers. Mr. Speaker, Māori and Pacific health and community providers also remain essential to our plan, as they have all the way through. Now, we've supported their work by investing over $250 million, including $120 million to support Māori communities to fast-track vaccinations and prepare for COVID-19 in our community. And we'll continue that work in partnership. But, Mr. Speaker, advice from our experts tell us that Omicron will not be the last variant that we will face this year. It's advice, Mr. Speaker, that sadly the opposition, I notice, have chosen to ignore. They declared the 1st of December Freedom Day, the day that the borders should open, even when the World Health Organization had declared Omicron a variant of concern, and the booster campaign had only just begun. They claim that they are ready to manage the pandemic because they have declared it over. They were wrong then, and they are wrong now, Mr. Speaker. It is not over, but that does not mean that we cannot move forward and that we cannot keep making progress, and so we are. This year begins our reconnection with the world. And Mr. Speaker, you would have already heard me announce the phases of our reopening plan, that we see those already eligible to come into our managed isolation facilities to now be able to self-isolate beginning with the first step in less than 3 weeks' time. Now, this is an important moment as we reconnect with family and with friends, and as business access the skilled labour that they need, and as exporters more easily connect with really important markets. Mr. Speaker, New Zealand is in demand, and this year we meet that head on. But Mr. Speaker, everything we step into this year requires planning and preparation. And here is where we'll take the very best of our COVID response to address our other challenges. Now, the Ministry of Health and District Health Boards are working already to reduce the impact of seasonal illnesses that we know will have an impact on our health system, particularly as New Zealand reconnects with the world. Seasonal influenza will likely re-emerge. We need to prepare, and here's how we'll do that. First, we'll deliver an influenza immunisation program to maximise uptake for at-risk New Zealanders. Using the expertise and the infrastructure that we've already generated from the COVID-19 vaccination program, we'll work hard to deliver high rates of vaccination for our elderly, our immunocompromised, and anyone else at risk. But that's not all we can do. We know the importance of staying home when you're sick, and we've made that easier with workers now eligible for 10 days sick leave to reduce illness in the workplace. We know the importance, Mr. Speaker, of keeping our kids in schools and early learning centres, so we're working hard to make that as safe as possible by offering vaccines to 5 to 11-year-olds, maximising natural ventilation, and investing in filtration machines. But it's the place we spend most of our time that requires the most investment. We need healthier homes, warmer homes, drier homes, homes that don't make our tamariki sick. That's why our Warmer Kiwi Homes program has already delivered 80,000 insulation and heating installs in low-income households since 2018. And by the end of this financial year, we'll accelerate the rollout of insulation and heating installs, delivering 30,000 more warm, dry homes. And this is work we are pleased to continue with the Green Party. We're also going to roll out the Healthy Homes Initiative to an additional 9 new regions, Mr. Speaker, which means more insulation, curtains, beds, bedding, minor repairs, floor coverings, ventilation, heating sources, all of the things that decrease hospitalisation and the incidence of things like rheumatic fever in this country. And on top of this, we'll get on with building more housing and continuing to overcome the housing crisis we inherited. Kāinga Order and community housing providers will deliver over 2,000 additional public housing places. That's adding to the 8,700 delivered since November 2017. And while I note some members on the front bench of the opposition may laugh, these are numbers that far outstrip anything that government ever managed to build while they were in government, where their focus was on selling down public housing stock rather than building the homes that we need. Whai Kāinga, Whai Oranga and the Māori Infrastructure Fund will also see the delivery of approximately 1,000 new homes, repairs to 700 and 2,700 additional infrastructure-enabled sites. Now, together, these represent the greatest investment ever in Māori housing. But housing represents, Mr. Speaker, and we know this in this House, just one of the many challenges we faced as a nation before COVID. Our health system was also in desperate need of reform. It's not right that the care that you get in our health system in this country can vary so much depending on where you live. One of our top priorities this year is the abolition of district health boards and the establishment of Health New Zealand and the Māori Health Authority to deliver a genuinely national health service for all New Zealanders. We want all New Zealanders to live longer and healthier lives, which is why the Māori Health Authority is absolutely key. We all know the dire statistics. They are undeniable. Māori die at twice the rate as non-Māori from cardiovascular disease. Māori tamariki have a mortality rate 1.5 times the rate found in non-Māori children. And Māori die on average 7 years earlier than non-Māori. We must turn these stats around. And doing the same old things won't cut it anymore. Now, some, Mr. Speaker, have called our plan separatist, when in fact the opposite is true. This is about reaching the equality we currently do not have in this country. Mr. Speaker, we are also going to establish a new public health agency to ensure we're better equipped to fight any future pandemics that we may face as a nation. We'll also better support the estimated 1.1 million disabled people in New Zealand through the new Ministry for Disabled People, standalone accessibility legislation that identifies, prevents and removes barriers to participation, and the national rollout of Enabling Good Lives, which puts a voice of disabled people and their families at the heart of decision-making. This is work that's time is overdue. Mr. Speaker, if there is another challenge that COVID has highlighted in this country that already existed, it is mental health. I was speaking to a medical practitioner recently who conveyed to me the additional appointments that they'd seen in their practice as a result of the pandemic, increased or exacerbated depression and anxiety in particular. This is all the more reason to continue with the rollout of primary mental health services and addiction services across New Zealand. We have established new primary and community mental health and addiction services in general practice, as well as kaupapa Māori, Pacific and youth-specific practices. Together, these services have now delivered over 280,000 sessions since the program began in July 2019 and provided support to over 27,000 people in between July and September of 2021. By the end of this year, 2.7 million enrolled New Zealanders will have access to integrated primary mental health and addiction care through general practice, Mr. Speaker. That is a step change in how New Zealanders access mental health services and brings the delivery of mental health into the place where people get support for their health needs already. But that is not enough for us, Mr. Speaker. This year we'll also expand the successful Mana Ake scheme that provides mental health and resilience support for New Zealand children in years 1 to 8 to 24,000 of our most vulnerable children, expanding into Northland, Counties Manukau, Bay of Plenty, Lakes and the West Coast region. But Mr. Speaker, alongside the known vulnerability of our children and our young people, we also know there are two communities that have particularly high rates of burnout and stress, and they are our small business owners, and we're increasingly seeing the impacts of mental health issues in our rural communities. COVID-19 has exacerbated this with ongoing uncertainty and isolation. Rural communities also face the challenge of accessing mental health services. We're committed to working with small business groups and the rural sector to ensure better support and access to mental health. Mr. Speaker, in the face of 2 years of pandemic and disruption, New Zealand businesses and workers have proven to be resilient, they've proven to be adaptable and they've proven to be innovative. We have weathered the storm of COVID better than many of our key trading partners. New Zealand's economy grew 4.9% over the last year, outperforming much of the OECD, and our primary sector obtained record export prices. And we have a construction boom underpinned by our infrastructure program and strong support for new housing. But that is not the limit of our ambition, because as I said last week, in our COVID recovery, we must not return to business as usual because we are better than that. In fact, we were elected to address the challenges that have held too many back for too long. That's why our economic plan is to build a high-wage, low-carbon economy that provides economic security in good times and in bad. It is focused on increasing the value of our export and developing new markets, investing in skills and new technology, modernising infrastructure, research and innovation to drive productivity, reducing emissions, and of course, Mr. Speaker, increasing wages. Let's break some of those elements down. As the border opens, New Zealand's exporters will be able to reconnect face-to-face. We'll build on that with a proactive program of re-engaging with high-priority international markets. New Zealand will sign a free trade agreement with the United Kingdom. We'll continue to work towards concluding a free trade agreement with the European Union. And I will lead trade delegations and trade-supporting visits to key markets in Europe, the United States, Australia and Asia this year. Mr. Speaker, as a Labour government, building skills and training opportunities is key and at the heart of our agenda. not only links into our wider plans on infrastructure, it also underpins and enables a productive high-wage economy. We have already started the work to develop and grow our talent here. We already have the reform of vocational training in this country with 6 new industry governed workforce development councils. And you can see the impact we're having in the numbers. Our investment in fees-free apprenticeships and targeted training has seen more than 175,000 people take up these learning opportunities since July 2020. Mr. Speaker, that includes 80,000 apprentices. We've seen Mana in Mahi, a program that supports young people to obtain trade qualifications and enter into lasting employment, go from strength to strength with 4,446 placements. And all of this means that we're better placed to roll out the crucial plank of our plan, and that is building infrastructure. Mr. Speaker, historical underinvestment in infrastructure has been a handbrake on our economy. It's why we're planning for the next 30 years instead of electoral cycles. It's why we're investing $57.3 billion in infrastructure over the next 5 years alone. It's why we're modernising our schools. It's why we continue to rebuild our health system with 24 construction projects. It's why we're enabling more housing, providing New Zealanders with greater choice in tackling congestion in the transport system, rolling out telecommunications and energy infrastructure, preparing, Mr. Speaker, the economy for the future. And it's also why we'll fix the issue of persistent underinvestment in our water services. Mr. Speaker, I have said this before. When we look back on this period in our country's history, I don't want us just to reflect on how we weathered the storm of a pandemic, but what we built after. Our economy cannot afford to return to business as usual because the status quo is unsustainable. And that's why tackling climate change will be a core part of our economic strategy. Climate change must not overwhelm us. In fact, it is our greatest opportunity for new jobs and higher wages. For a country already earning a premium from our clean, green and innovative image, there is an opportunity to use that natural advantage to create new jobs in new industries. It will also reduce New Zealand's reliance on global energy prices. Other countries are moving to compete and seize the opportunities, and New Zealand cannot afford to be left behind, not economically and not morally either. Not when the future of our exports will be built on a credible plan to bend our emissions curve and meet our targets. Mr. Speaker, that's why this year, our first emission reduction plan will put innovation and clean technology at the heart of our economic transition. We'll continue to support businesses reduce their energy costs through the Giddy Fund, which already has reduced lifetime emissions by 6.6 million tonnes. We'll continue to transition our transport fleet. And already, Mr. Speaker, the Clean Car Discount, which came into effect, has seen the number of new electric vehicles being bought each month triple. And alongside the Clean Car Discount and Clean Car Standards, the Low Emission Transport Fund will begin supporting businesses to pilot new emission transport technology. Mr. Speaker, you'll know we'll continue with the Green Investment Fund, which has quadrupled the amount of investment in low carbon technologies. And Mr. Speaker, we'll continue the work of He Waka Eke Noa and our partnership, supporting more farmers to adopt existing measures and technologies to reduce on-farm emissions. Mr. Speaker, the opposition claim they share our climate ambition. Why then have they opposed almost every initiative that would bring our emissions profile down? Climate change is a challenge we cannot postpone, just like child poverty, just like housing, just like mental health. And Mr. Speaker, New Zealand has entrusted the government with the responsibility of bringing this country through our current crisis, but all of those challenges as well. And we will continue to do that, but we will do more than that. We'll provide stability, a united team, and a singular focus on a recovery that even after a crisis, Mr. Speaker, leaves New Zealand better than we found it.
The question is that the motion be agreed to. Those of that opinion will say aye.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I move that all the words after that be deleted and they be replaced with "This House has no confidence in this government that returns to Wellington."
Order. A point of order. Mr Speaker, I regret to advise the House that once the Speaker has put a vote, there's no further debate on it.
I haven't completed putting it.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I move that all the words after that be deleted and are replaced with "This House has no confidence in this government that returns to Wellington at the start of each year with more promises it has no intention of keeping and fails to deliver." Mr Speaker, before I begin, can I just wish you and all my colleagues here a happy new year. I trust you've all had a good break. It's good that everyone is back rearing to go. I can tell you the National Party is ready. Mr Speaker, Kiwis are tired. They're tired of this government that's addicted to spending and they're consistently failing to get things done. And after 4 years of stagnation and failure, they're tired of being let down by a government that has turned out to be what? All spin and no delivery. This government has never met a problem it didn't think it could solve with just a little bit more government, a little bit more Wellington, a little bit more centralisation, a comms plan, more bureaucracy and less input from affected communities. They're tired of a government that's clearly out of ideas, out of energy, out of steam, and in less than 2 years, frankly, will be out of office. Because I can tell you the people of New Zealand can see what an absolute mess this Labour government is making of things. They see through it. They can see that Labour has doubled our country's debt and they've set government spending on a completely unsustainable long-term path. They can see that all that spending, all that borrowing isn't actually getting results. And it's not delivering the long-term solutions to our challenges or improving people's daily lives, and it's actually not getting things done. This government confuses activity with achievement. This government confuses words with action, and they are two very, very different concepts. And now here we are with an overheated economy, and they can see it's clearly making things worse. It's pushing up prices, it's pushing out the private sector, and it's squeezing everyday New Zealanders. Now, Mr Speaker, Kiwis' ability to be able to get ahead and to enjoy a higher quality of life depends on the size of our economic engine, and it needs some serious upgrading if we're to go forward together well. We're suffering in this country from what is a productivity disease. The average Kiwi's working for an hour to earn what the average Australian earns in 44 minutes. Now, Grant Robertson, when he was in opposition, used to talk endlessly about productivity per capita metrics, but he doesn't do it anymore, and he doesn't do it anymore because he fundamentally doesn't care about small business people. The only economic tools he's been able to use is to spend more of Kiwis' money, with government spending now up a staggering 68% since they came to power. And that spending is driving a massive increase into the cost of living, which is now running at a 30-year high of almost 6%. We have a cost of living crisis in this country. And I'm hearing it when we go around the country. I'm sure many of the MPs in this House are hearing it as well. And it doesn't matter whether there's frustration around a block of cheese costing $15 to $16 or unsustainable levels of rent that are becoming so unaffordable to everyday Kiwis. They are feeling the pain of this government's economic mismanagement. And you've got to ask yourself just one question. Are you better off under this government than you were 12 months ago? Are you better off than you were 4 years ago? And I can tell you right now, the answer is an absolutely categorical no. Under this Labour government, people are working harder, they're not getting ahead, and they're going backwards. Everyone knows it, everyone feels it, even Grant Robertson knows it, he feels it, he knows it's true as well. That's the reality. And sadly, that's what you get with a government that is focused on making announcements, on spin, and not actually on getting results. That's what you get. Spin over substance, you get activity over achievement, you get a so-called year of delivery that delivered little more than press releases, you get the year of the vaccine that somehow delivered the slowest vaccine rollout in the developed world, resulting in a 15-week lockdown at $8 billion. You get a government that banned rapid antigen tests, then changed its mind, and then decided to confiscate them from the good, proactive businesses who were just trying to keep their own workers safe. And Mr. Speaker, you get a Prime Minister who promised to make housing more affordable, but instead she's delivered the largest, the fastest increase in house prices in our nation's history. The average house price is now over $1 million. And in just 4 years of Labor mismanagement, we've seen house prices rise by a staggering $380,000. And it's a truly shocking result of government incompetence. Now, Labor are pushing the dream of Kiwi home ownership away from a whole generation of young New Zealanders. And I can tell you, rapidly rising interest rates are only going to make things much, much worse. Weekly rents are up $125 since 2017. That's making it harder for Kiwis to pay the bills, let alone a chance to be able to save up for a deposit. And just think about that. That's a Kiwi renting who has to go find $6,500 after tax in a year to rent the same house that they were renting just 4 years ago. You've got almost 25,000 people languishing on the state waiting list for a state house. That's a 4-fold increase in 4 years. That's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. There's 4,500 children living in motels, sharing unsuitable accommodation with violent gang members and drug dealers, all at a cost of about $1.2 million a day. And so, Mr. Speaker, it is an absolute moral failure, and it is an indictment on a government that promised to solve the housing crisis, but has made it so much worse. And this from a Prime Minister who promised to build 100,000 Kiwi-built houses in 10 years. But here we are, we're 4 years in, and how many more do we have to go? Another 98,000 houses to go. Prime Minister promised big on state housing, but over the past 6 months, we've seen the state landlord remove homes that it's built. That's right, they've taken away more houses than they've built in the last 6 months. Now, Mr. Speaker, nowhere has the Prime Minister promised more and delivered less than in transport. Now, one of the first promises she made was that she'd send a tram from downtown Auckland to Mount Roskill. It would cost less than $2 billion, and it would have been completed by the end of last year. Well, here we are, we're 4 years in, and the only thing that's been delivered is a brand new spanking price tag of $15 billion. And if you're depending on which officials you want to listen to, it could be up to $24 billion. And then you've got a promise of a decade of disruption in Auckland. And I reckon for all of that, the government could actually go out and buy each of the team of 5 million people a brand new state-of-the-art Swish e-bike. And they'd still have billions of dollars left to invest in heavy rail. They'd still have money left to invest in upgrading ferries. They'd still have money to invest in dedicated busways and improving maintenance and safety on our highways. But that's the sort of sensible projects that are actually about helping people and businesses connect and do business around our towns and cities. And that's not what Labor politicians are about. It's about a legacy or trying to impress our Twitter followers. Now, Mr. Speaker, at the last election, voters were also promised no new taxes. But when you have a 68% increase in government spending, when you have a doubling of the debt in this country, which has to be repaid, forget about what modern monetary theorists say, it has to be repaid. And when it does, that will mean that we don't have the cash to invest in better public services or productivity enhancing intergenerational infrastructure. You just know, you know in your bones that Labor is going to increase your taxes. No doubt about it, it's coming. And because Labor can't manage money, they'll come after yours. Labor broke that election promise of no new taxes in pretty quick time. What we saw was a ramming through of a stealth capital gains tax. That was quickly followed by the infamous ute tax. And if that wasn't enough, Grant Robertson has now cooked up another brand new tax. This time he wants to slap it on every single worker and every single business in New Zealand. And would you believe it? The Labor Party wants to roll out a jobs tax. Now they're going to try and hide it. They're going to call it a levy, or they're going to call it a contribution, or they're going to call it income insurance. But you all know the saying, if it looks like a duck, if it swims like a duck, and if it quacks like a duck, then it probably is a duck. And I can tell you, this is a tax. This is a tax. Not a mallard. Making Kiwis pay an extra tax at a time when Kiwis need that cash in their own pockets as they navigate a cost of living crisis is this, when they're buying stuff that's going up twice as fast as their wages, that's what they really need. They need the money back in their pockets, not going to Grant Robertson through another tax. They're living in a cost of living crisis, but it doesn't seem that this government cares or even understands the reality of that for people. Now, with Mr. Speaker, what we didn't hear much about from the Prime Minister today was what's happening with the Three Waters reforms. Now, I can tell you, Nanaia Mahuta, she made up her decision on day one. She locked in on a model. She's gone through a sham consultation process with local government. And despite saying it would be voluntary, lo and behold, it's now been compulsorily acquiring the assets from ratepayers and citizens who've spent decades paying for them. And I can tell you the costs are unrealistic, the scale benefits aren't there, there's massive cross-subsidisation between districts, and most importantly, it's got a convoluted co-governance and management structure that essentially is like a set of Russian dolls that launders the asset out of the control of ratepayers and citizens and local government through a process to end up in the government's hands. But I wouldn't be too worried about it, because I can tell you what I think is going to happen. I can tell you what's going to happen. Grant Robertson is worried, right? He's been studying those polls over summer. He's been looking into the numbers. And in the same way, he went and killed off Michael Wood's lovely $785 million walking and cycling bridge. In the same way that he's pushed and cajoled and argued with the Prime Minister about finally opening the joint up, he's going to come in and he's going to squash these reforms too. I bet you that's what's going to happen. You mark my words, these three water reforms are absolutely finished, and I predict that we're going to have a new local government minister very, very shortly too. Either way, watch this space. A big back down is coming your way. But Mr. Speaker, I've made it clear that our job as a national party over the next 20 months is not just to hold this government to account, to oppose them, and all their failure to deliver, of which there's just endless opportunities, but we are here to propose. We're here to propose an alternative vision of this country. And so that come the next election, the New Zealand people will be able to see a national government in waiting, ready to go. Now, we've already proposed some pretty sensible upgrades to our COVID management plan. And as we navigate our way through Omicron and out of these endless restrictions, we've been doing the same. And Mr. Speaker, usually what happens is they like to rubbish our ideas, and then they go back and then they pick them up and they talk about them, and then a few months or a few weeks later, lo and behold, pre-departure testing, rapid antigen testing, a special fund to pre-purchase the COVID treatments, that all starts to appear in the government's plans. Now, I have to say, we don't mind that. We don't mind that. We're good with that, because we're here to act in New Zealand's national interests. And if we can help a government that doesn't have its own ideas, we're very good with that. We're fine by that. So feel free, as we propose, take good practical ideas that are in New Zealand's interest and get them done. I have to say, I think the government did a pretty good job in 2020 managing COVID, and I've said that publicly and I'll continue to say so. But I have to say, 2021 was a shambles. We had lots of time to see what was going on. We had first mover advantage, and we didn't get anything done on time. It was a total sort of look 1 or 2 days ahead, never have a plan, and just make it up as you go along. That was the story of 2021, and we ended up losing the plot pretty quickly. For most of the year, we had the slowest vaccine rollout of the developed world after being told we'd be in the front of the queue. And when Delta hit, we only had 20% of the eligible population were fully vaccinated. And so we had to go into that extended lockdown. And rather than delivering quickly on vaccines or rapid antigen tests and boosters, the government's response has relied on extending everyday restrictions to everyday life. Because there's been no plan, we need to be looking further ahead, and that's why we've been arguing for things like rapid antigen tests so that people can have them wherever they want them, they can take control, take personal responsibility, and buy them from supermarkets and pharmacies. We want them to be available to everyone. Seniors, workers, kids in schools should all have the opportunity to get tested to help keep us all safe. But what did the government do? What did the government do? They banned them for no other reason than they were ideologically opposed to any non-government solution. They didn't work with community organisations, they didn't work with businesses, they don't believe actually that a government should work with business and community on some of our biggest challenges, which just speaks to the arrogance, the centralisation and control agenda, the we know best agenda that this government's running with. And it's only after opposition, it's only after challenge from the media that we see a government react and miraculously start finding large quantities of rapid antigen tests in a matter of days. But it could have been done 6 months earlier. Could have been done a lot sooner. Mr. Speaker, the National Party will continue to push the government to do better on COVID, and that's our job. But it's also our job to offer solutions to all the other long-term challenges New Zealand faces. And I have to say, we've got a lot of long-term challenges that we're not getting outcomes or results for. To rebuild our economy, we're going to need to rebuild our connections with the world. And that's 7.8 billion people sitting in 195 countries that we trade and do business with. And New Zealand has a very proud tradition of going out in the world and building business and building export businesses to do so. And we need to reclaim that confidence, that ambition, that aspiration that we seem to have lost. I want New Zealand to be world leading. I want New Zealand to realise its full potential on all levels. I want a place where good enough is not just good enough for us. National understands that the only sustainable way to lift incomes across the economy is for Kiwis to become more productive. Now, for too long, Kiwis have been of the mindset that they just need to get ahead by working longer hours. We're already some of the longest working people on planet Earth, but our incomes still lag behind. So we've got to boost productivity to realise our potential. We've got to work smarter, not harder. And National's going to do that by investing in education so the basics are taught brilliantly and our kids can go out in the world and realise their dream and actually access higher paying jobs. We'll do it by delivering the infrastructure we need to support growth. We'll do it by attracting the top talent here because we know when we do, they grow the pie for all of us. We'll do it by opening up New Zealand to the world. We'll do it by backing small business up and down the country, not just letting businesses suffer while the government overheats an economy. Mr. Speaker, I'd say expanding that economic pie is how we secure our future. It's actually, and today, the Prime Minister made a big deal about unemployment being low. And it's true, unemployment is low in this country. But that's what you get when you have unprecedented government spending and record low interest rates designed to stimulate the economy. The only two levers that this government and Grant Robertson's been capable of using. But that's what you get. And unfortunately, that's the same recipe that's pushing up inflation. That's the same recipe that I can tell you won't end well for us. And the real frustration with unemployment being so low is that this government has not been able to help Kiwis get off benefit and into work. There are almost 90,000 more people on a benefit today than when Labor first took office. 90,000 people. 1 in 9 Kiwis are currently dependent upon the state for an income. And it just begs the question, what is the government actually doing to support those on benefits into jobs? And even more concerning is the fact that Kiwis are spending longer on those benefits. 116,000 people now spend more than 1 year on a job seeker benefit. And that's an increase of 50,000 Kiwis since Labor were first elected. 50,000 people staying longer on a benefit for longer. And when we know, and on this side of the house, we know when someone's out of work for a long period of time, it is difficult for them to re-enter the workforce. But if you can't get people from welfare to work now, with all the vacancies, with all the labour shortages, with low levels of unemployment in this country, when will you be able to do it? And let's be honest, we think the Labor government has not only engineered a cost of living crisis, they've engineered a dependency crisis that is the exact opposite of kindness and compassion. They don't care that they've written off and consigned a whole bunch of New Zealanders to a life that's just slightly better than poverty and subsistence. They've decided in their heads, with all their lovely white-collar backgrounds as academics and professional career politicians and union organisers, that somewhere between where they are and where the other jobs are, there's a miraculous line that work below that level isn't worthwhile. And I can tell you right now, there is. People can never, we want people off welfare, getting into work, and we know why. Because when you get a job, when you get into work, you get a sense of self-worth. You get a sense of mastery. You get a sense that you're a feeling of control of your lives. Mr. Speaker, I have to say National is more aspirational for New Zealanders. We care deeply about all of this. We care deeply about New Zealanders. We don't want them consigned to forever to be on welfare. We want them in work. We think that's dignity. We think that's the pathway that they need. So, Mr. Speaker, New Zealand deserves better. New Zealand deserves a government that is forward-thinking. New Zealand deserves a government that's prepared to tackle the big issues. A government that doesn't simply just react to the latest headlines or put all its efforts into spinning the news cycle. A government that doesn't just throw money at a problem and then just walk away. A government that doesn't just, we want a government that restores our confidence, our ambition, our aspiration as a country that actually builds a society opportunity. And that's what we're going to do with a national government, Mr. Speaker, and that's what we're going to deliver for the people of New Zealand. Thank you.
The Honourable James Shaw.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. E ngā mana, e ngā reo, e ngā rau rangatira mao tēnei whare nui o te ao. Ngā mihi mahana kia koutou katoa. Nō reira, tēnā koutou katoa. Well, Mr. Speaker, based on the last couple of performances, I have to say that the next year looks like it's going to be a somewhat one-sided battle between Superwoman and Lux Luthor. And I have to say, he has managed to fend off his chief rival over here, Brainiac, but based on that performance, he is yet to find the kryptonite. Mr. Speaker, I have to say the Prime Minister's statement demonstrates that with a strong Green voice in this Parliament and in this government, Aotearoa is at last heading towards a future where communities thrive, where ecosystems flourish, and our economy is sustainable and pollution-free. That is the vision that the Green Party was founded on over 30 years ago. And Mr. Speaker, I am going to respond to the Prime Minister's statement through the lens of each of those three long-term and long-held priorities. But before I do want to offer our response in relation to the shorter-term but somewhat all-consuming challenge that is in front of us right now. And it is entirely understandable that the attention of both the people and the government of Aotearoa is taken up primarily with the ongoing pandemic crisis. Now, as we reconnect Aotearoa with the rest of the world, the priority must be on the protection and the well-being of whānau and communities. And there are many people here at home and abroad who have been unable to be with their friends and family at precisely the moment when they needed them most. But at the same time, it is a fact that there are literally thousands of people alive today who would not be if it had not been for our border restrictions and MIQ system. We have one of the, we have one of the lowest mortality rates in the world because of it. And it was good to hear from the Prime Minister that 40% of children have now received the first dose of the vaccine. That is a huge success. But there is no doubt that the reopening of the border does increase the risk of worsening the peak of the Omicron outbreak and future variants. Now, the Greens called for MIQ prioritisation based on humanitarian grounds. And we called for, and that includes separated families, and we called for specialist MIQ facilities. And that would have enabled more New Zealanders to reconnect with their loved ones. And that would have meant that we would have been able to maintain an elimination strategy long enough for everyone to get their booster shots and for all children to be immunised. So if the borders are to open up before that point, Mr. Speaker, then we must increase the focus on protecting and supporting our most vulnerable communities. And we're very pleased to hear the Prime Minister say in her statement that tens of millions of rapid antigen tests mass tests will be made available to New Zealanders. The Greens' view is that that shouldn't just apply to rapid antigen tests, but also to N95 masks. They should be made available free to everybody who needs one. We're also very pleased to hear the Prime Minister announce the extension of the Healthy Homes Initiative, the War Kiwi Homes Insulation Program, and the boost to the number of public housing places. Focusing on the social determinants of health, like housing, is utterly critical to reducing the impact of Omicron and later COVID variants. Now, as the Prime Minister said in her statement, empowering and funding Māori, Pacifica and community providers was critical to getting the vaccination rates of those communities over 90% in most parts of the country. Because when Māori and Pacific peoples and those who are most marginalised amongst us are taken care of, we are all taken care of. Now, my final word on the pandemic response, Mr. Speaker, before I move on to some of the longer-term issues facing us, is about the economic response. 30 years of focusing on the debt to GDP ratio as the single most important measure of a government's success has left our country with a colossal deficit in housing, in health, in education, in transport, in water, in energy, in local government and in public services. But in our response to the pandemic, Mr. Speaker, we have actually demonstrated that actually government can marshal the resources necessary to fight a crisis when the moment comes. We've demonstrated what can happen when good government meets good science. And we've demonstrated that the best economic response is first and foremost to keep everybody safe and well. But as we grasp towards some new semblance of a post-pandemic normality, we must not simply revert to the absolutely busted notions of the last 30 years that left us chronically short of houses and hospital beds and water pipes and classrooms and buses and trains as we were when the pandemic started. Which brings me, Mr. Speaker, to the Green Party's priorities, which are, and for a long time, have been, 1, to protect and to restore our natural world, 2, a fairer and more inclusive community, and 3, a clean zero-carbon economy. And so, to have a New Zealand Prime Minister devote as much time as ours just did to placing climate change at the heart of our nation's economic strategy in her opening address to Parliament gives me hope. And it should give some hope too to all of the scientists and the activists, the school strikers and the parents, the business people and the regular folk who have campaigned for so many decades to make it so. Now, the Prime Minister outlined a series of actions that we will take in energy and transport and agriculture and waste to modernise our economy and to cut emissions. And I won't repeat those, but I will add that as we take those actions, we will seek to do so in a way that first ensures that the transition is equitable and just and inclusive. Second, like our pandemic response, that it will be based on what the science says is required. Third, that it honours Te Tiriti and supports Māori in the design and the development of the transition. Fourth, that it puts the protection and restoration of our Indigenous biodiversity at the centre of our response. And fifth, is well signalled, unlocks investment, builds innovation and creates jobs. Now, delivering all of this across so many industries and social sectors requires the attention and the leadership of a slew of government agencies and at least half of Cabinet. And so I would like to thank all of the Labour ministers for all that they are doing to deliver on New Zealand's first and now long-awaited comprehensive plan to lower emissions and to limit warming. Mr. Speaker, thanks to the changes that we made to the emissions trading scheme, there is now at least $4.5 billion available to tackle climate change over the course of the next 4 years. Now, dollar for euro, as a proportion of GDP, that puts our climate change response on a par with Germany. And I want to take this opportunity to address Te Pāti Māori, the National Party and the ACT Party. I know that we will disagree about many of the policy prescriptions that we may employ to get us there. But I do hope that we are able to maintain the consensus about where we need to get to and the institutions that we created to help to guide us there. So in that spirit, I will be consulting with all parties shortly on the emissions budgets before they are finalised. And we will also hold a parliamentary debate on those budgets so that every party may put down its views on record. And I hope that that will mean that there is a clear message to New Zealand about the direction of travel that has to span several changes of government. But I do also welcome what I know will be robust critique and debate about the precise measures that this government will be employing in the first emissions plan. Of course, the emissions reduction plan is not the only major milestone on the climate change front in 2022. In August, we will be publishing the National Adaptation Plan, outlining how we're going to build resilience to the increasingly frequent and severe floods and droughts and storms that we are already experiencing here and around the Pacific. And that will lead to the introduction of the Climate Change Adaptation Act early next year. Of course, also this year, we will be deciding on the design of the system that we will be using to price agricultural emissions and support farmers to adopt practices and technology that adds value, increases profitability, and cuts emissions. There are so many good farmers who are already working with more sustainable and regenerative farming practices. And in 2019, the sector asked for and was given an opportunity to create a credible, effective, and fair way to reduce emissions from agriculture. And I hope that they take it. Mr. Speaker, I mentioned that one of the Green Party's top 3 priorities was to protect and restore our natural world, and that will remain true in 2022. Tackling the biodiversity crisis goes hand in hand with tackling the climate crisis, but for decades, governments have approached these issues separately. I am determined to better harness the power of nature to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and to help us to adapt to the effects of climate change. Also in 2022, the Greens will be pushing efforts and funding to rescue our native species from the brink. And we will continue to demand no more mines on conservation land. As the government reforms the Resource Management Act, we will be the voice for nature in the House. And we will put the health of our oceans firmly on the political agenda, pushing for a fix to the broken rules that allow overfishing, habitat destruction and pollution to continue. Mr. Speaker, the Greens have always stood for fairer, more inclusive communities. And the truth is that in Aotearoa today, the comfort and security of the wealthiest New Zealanders would be virtually unimaginable to those on an average income, let alone the poorest half of our society. The clearest indicator of the rot is the housing crisis and the record low rates of home ownership, especially amongst Māori and Pacifica. Last year, as has been well travelled, house prices rose a staggering 23%. Thousands of families who should have been able to buy a home are instead funding their landlord's retirement through exorbitant weekly rents, which were up 5.8% last year alone for new tenancies. That is unfair and unjustified. We welcome the Prime Minister's commitment to accelerate housing supply and improve the emergency housing system. But one of these options has to include the possibility, wait for it, David, of rent controls. And I know that has to include, I know that my colleagues on the right will blow their gaskets over this. But rent controls have been in place in cities like New York and Paris and Berlin for decades, and the sky hasn't fallen in. And in places like Ireland and Scotland and London, governments are showing what new modern rent controls can look like. So given the scale of the housing crisis in New Zealand, this House ought to consider it as an option. Now, as an Associate Housing Minister, my co-leader, the Honourable Marama Davidson, will be working to bring support to our whānau who find themselves where no one expects or deserves to be, and that is without a home. We are in the midst of a crisis that is forcing all but the wealthiest out of quality, stable housing. And I'm very proud of what she is doing and what we are doing to see that nobody goes without it. At the same time, this year, the Honourable Marama Davidson will be working across government and with tangata whenua, communities and NGOs to deliver the actions outlined in Aotearoa's first ever strategy and action plan to eliminate family violence and sexual violence, Te Aorere Kura. Mr. Speaker, Te Aorere Kura is nothing short of a landmark in New Zealand's social history. But we also know that the hard work is just beginning, and I cannot overstate the importance of that work. Everyone has the right to live in a peaceful home, to be respected, to be safe from mistreatment and violence. And, Mr. Speaker, the Greens will also keep pushing for action and approaches that honour te tiriti o Waitangi and the tino rangatiratanga of Hapu and Iwi over their lands, waters and people. Honouring te tiriti can not only right past wrongs, but also empower Aotearoa to address underlying social and environmental problems. For decades, Māori have been excluded from decisions about what happens to land that used to be theirs. Now the Green Party are calling on the government to begin a process of returning stolen land to tangata whenua so that they may reassert their ancestral role as kaitiaki of our precious whenua, awa and moana. So, Mr. Speaker, in conclusion, we broadly support the direction laid out in the Prime Minister's statement. But fundamentally, Mr. Speaker, the Green Party's view is that our country, our planet and our people face a multiplicity of interconnected, independent and escalating crises. But the root cause of all of these crises, whether it's inequality in health or housing or wealth, whether it's in mass extinctions or ocean plastics or polluted rivers, whether it's in the accelerating droughts or storms or coastal erosion, the root cause of all of these crises is the same, and that is an economic system that privatises benefit and socialises cost. It will not be transformed by incremental action. As these compounding crises continue to metastasise, Green Party ministers inside the government and MPs outside of it will continue to stand for transformative, long-term action over incremental short-term fixes. Einstein warned us that we cannot solve the problems with the same level of thinking that created them. And we agree with Einstein. And recent polling suggests that more and more New Zealanders agree with us. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa.
Mr. Speaker. The question is that the motion moved by the Leader of the Opposition, the amendment moved by the Leader of the Opposition, be agreed to. David Singer.
Mr. Speaker, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and you'll note that James Shaw gave some of the MPs around the chamber superhero names. He appears to be living in a cartoon. And I thought, what would I call James Shaw? Surely he would be Captain Planet. And then I thought, hang on a minute. Those of you who have watched Captain Planet know that Captain Planet had 5 people's powers combined. And James Shaw is in a coalition agreement where he has no powers at all. And that's probably a good thing, because he just decided to bring back the economic lunacy that we should bring back rent control. Well, Mr. Speaker, it's a good example of why we needn't worry about that, because Wonder Woman, as James Shaw called the Prime Minister, ruled out that policy this morning, so we can be safe in the knowledge that James Shaw's lunacy, or was it Marama Davidson's on behalf, won't be going anywhere. Mr. Speaker, it is so good to have our Parliament back, because this democracy depends on the simple idea that any person can stand for office and be elected and stand on this green carpet and question the government and hold it accountable. There were so many times during this summer that I wished we had that power and ability. Why is the government stealing rapid antigen tests? Why, if people with Omicron, who we know have Omicron because they had a test that said they have it, if they can isolate at home, why must people returning from overseas, those who've had their maternity care outsourced to the Taliban, queue up for a space in MIQ, and only 12% of them get one? Well, the government said it was because they wanted to delay the arrival of Omicron. Omicron's here. we still have the nonsensical, miserable and unjust concept of MIQ destroying people's lives and livelihoods. I wanted to ask, does the government understand that borrowing, printing and wasting money puts up the price of everything? You see, Mr. Speaker, this year is the year of the hangover. Anybody can get through a pandemic if they borrow enough money. The hard part is paying for it. I wanted to ask the government, why do they insist on putting the partnership principle of the treaty, as they call it, at the heart of everything, when, Mr. Speaker, it's not at the heart of the Labor Party constitution now, is it? Mr. Speaker, I wanted to ask why people must isolate for 14 days if they test positive, and a further 10 for everyone in their household. And is that why perhaps we have lower testing numbers in the start of Omicron that's more infectious than we did at the start of Delta that's supposed to spread slower? Could it be that small business is suffering because people are staying home due to a lockdown in all but name, where they fear going out because they can't afford to have 14 days isolation and another 10 for their family? And how are we supposed to get to stage 2 of the government's communications plan, public health response to COVID, if we don't have the cases they set that was the threshold for their own policy failing so we could move on to the next stage, because no one can afford to go out or get tested because the isolation rules are unworkable. So many questions for this government, and that's why it is so good to have our parliamentary democracy back in session. Mr. Speaker, actually the whole ACT team are thrilled to be back after 2021. Brooke has been extraordinary as our deputy and whip. She's organised the ACT caucus. She's broken stories on the neglect of patients and led a campaign against mortgage interest deductibility changes that make no sense, and forced this House to face up to the evil of the CCP when our government wanted to cut and run the other way. Nicole McKee, Parliament's most loved knitter, but she also skewered our hapless police minister on her softly approach to gangs again and again. Chris Bailey is stuck up for small business, and our overstretched police force, that same police minister won't stand up for with his, shall we say, cutting speeches in the House. Simon has travelled the country, Court that is, Mr. Speaker, although I'm sure Simon Bridges has travelled the country. I remember last time he did, actually. Simon Court, though, has travelled the country hearing from people in our primary and extractive industries and bringing the message back to Wellington that we need to stop regulating those who pay the bills to death, or we will not have any economy left. Mr. Speaker, James McDowell has worked hard for so many, heartlessly neglected by our clunky immigration bureaucracy, and presents legislation to Parliament that would underpin the purpose of our universities about being the free exchange of ideas, not complaining about emotional harm every time somebody disagrees with you, as if that'll never happen outside the walls of the university. Karen Shore is the ultimate battler and keeps building her base for the fundamental reform of the way we care for children displaced, something which every society struggles with, needs the care, attention and passion of somebody who has lived through that experience. Mark, well, what could you say, the authentic and loved voice of rural New Zealand. He is a star in a society, or a sector of society, that gets so little love from the rest of our government and Parliament for that matter. And then there's Tony, who is endlessly improving and searching for a way to reduce our shameful levels of recidivism. Mr. Speaker, not many politicians have the conviction to go to jail for their beliefs. Tony goes inside frequently to advocate for a better way to rehabilitate prisoners. And then there's Damien, who's done the heavy lifting on the Finance and Expenditure Committee, but also improved our voter base, particularly in Auckland, with his Celtic charm. I can't say any more. Mr. Speaker, it's a solid base for 9 new MPs to become the household names of the future. And this year, we have everything to play for. The best way of finding out, Mr. Speaker, what is really happening is to ask the majority of New Zealanders a simple question. Is the country going in the right direction or the wrong direction? And what is going to set the tone for this year is that for the first time since the GFC, the majority of New Zealanders are telling this government this country is going in the wrong direction. We now have a gap of 25 points between the left and the right on election night, down to a gap of only 6 points. 100,000 more voters changing their mind about Jacinda Ardern's leadership is enough to change the government. And Mr. Speaker, it's not difficult to see why. As more and more people understand that Jacinda's COVID response is a grand illusion, nearly every day brings another bizarre disaster showing we benefited from good luck, isolation, borrowing and printing, rather than good management. 1 million Kiwis offshore know anyone can quarantine an island. I mean, it took 100 million years of continental drift, but the work was already done for this government. We've now entered a wonderland where the Red Queen is talking backwards and 1 million Kiwis are locked out of their country in the cruelest abrogation of any state's responsibility to its citizens that anyone has seen in a modern democracy in a century, and it is shameful. Mr. Speaker, every aspect of the response has been incompetent. Testing, banned them, then allowed some, now stealing the ones that they did allow, now forcing unworkable isolation rules because without testing, the government's only solution is to lock people down until you probably don't have COVID anyway, even though they know that it is going to spread whether they decimate the economy with these unworkable isolation rules or not. When the penalty for testing positive is 14 days at home, Mr. Speaker, what do you think people are going to do if they're not a critical worker? The simple answer is that if your family or your business depends on you showing up for work, you're going to be a critical worker, Mr. Speaker. That is the reality. And then we're told to be grateful for getting some freedoms back, that our border will open over a torturous process between now and October, while Australia will be open for business just next week. 2 weeks' time, they're open. And you have to ask, how should a New Zealand tourism operator who's worked for 20 years, their whole career, to build up their enterprise feel when they watch the planes landing in Sydney and Melbourne and Brisbane, people going to spend their hard-earned money over there instead of over here, because our government, the government that boasted about a well-being approach where they would balance all of New Zealanders' different needs, now has a policy obsession with just one thing that blinds it to all of the hurt and misery that it causes to every other aspect of New Zealanders' well-being. Mr. Speaker, that's why we face the year of the hangover. Families know the price of everything has skyrocketed. Now, it's partly the result of supply chain constraints and inflationary pressure that's affected the whole world. But, Mr. Speaker, hear this. We have the second worst inflation in the developed world, and we have the second biggest government spending and stimulus program of the OECD behind the United States, who have the worst inflation in the developed world. We have done this to ourselves, or rather our government has done it to us. Make no mistake, this government knows its policies have been inflationary, and that is why we have a grand illusion. And here's another reason why people think the country's going in the wrong direction. This government was elected to fix housing. I have to admire the Prime Minister for her incredible chutzpah, getting up in her speech and talking about what the government's going to do about housing. Or maybe it's not bravery, maybe it's contempt for New Zealanders and an assumption of gullibility. The truth is that under this government, the average house price has gone up $387,000, 58%. The gap between homeowners and non-homeowners has skyrocketed under a Labor government, increasing inequality because they're incompetent at policy. They've got an economy that's busy, but it's not one that is productive or healthy. And that's why this year the Axe Party is campaigning for a healthier economy, an economy that makes careful use of taxpayers' money, because we know how carefully they had to earn and spend it. We are seeing at this time record tax takes. You know, if you take the amount of tax that this government collects for every single New Zealander, and if you're kind to the government and you adjust it for inflation, they are taking another $2,000 in tax overall for every person in your household. And they've been helped by inflation, because when prices go up, they get more GST, and if wages go up, which they're not compared with prices, you go into a higher tax bracket to buy the same stuff. Mr. Speaker, if inflation is a thief in your pocket, then the government should be head up for receiving stolen goods. They are inflating away their own debt and borrowing by lowering interest rates and causing inflation. But here's the sequel. That's why it's called a hangover. The only way the Reserve Bank can get in control of inflation is if they're prepared to raise interest rates. And you've got 2/3 of people coming off their mortgage rates this year. You're going to see people go up 2 points, and that is when this government will start to understand why people think they're going in the wrong direction. They haven't been competent at balancing New Zealand's needs through COVID. Anyone can isolate an island. Anyone can borrow $60 billion, but it's paying it back and controlling the cost of living where they have failed. And it's not just a healthier economy that we require, it's also healthier communities. You know, the Prime Minister has some gall to get up and talk about record low unemployment. You know, Mr. Speaker, they say unemployment's almost as low as 3%. What's interesting, 6% of the workforce are on the job seeker benefit. Another 6% are on other main benefits. So you've got 12% on a benefit and they claim 3% unemployment. Why is that? Well, Mr. Speaker, when Statistics New Zealand ring up and ask if you're unemployed, they ask, are you looking for work? If you're not looking for work, you're not unemployed. The figures the government puts out are completely incredible. And I mean that in the true sense of the word, that they are not credible. The real problems are that we have too many people in our community for whom the best pathway to prosperity in their community is to join a gang, because methamphetamine's a $500 million a year industry with no tax. We need healthy and thriving communities. We need communities where kids actually go to school. The government had a policy like that called partnership schools, kurahorua, or charter schools. You know how they work, Mr. Speaker. If the kids didn't show up, the school didn't get paid. You wouldn't believe what happened next. The school started focusing on making sure kids went to school. And once they were at school, it was much easier to teach them useful things for the rest of their life than if they weren't. None of this is complicated. We've been putting up the rates for benefits, and we're wondering why there's 12% on a main benefit despite claiming 3% unemployment. Well, the ACT Party says that if you're on welfare for the long term, we're going to use electronic income management and counselling to get you off a benefit. Mr. Speaker, that's what healthier communities look like, and it looks like treating the criminals like actual criminals and being responsive when people find themselves like a woman I met just last week in a dairy in Epsom. I said, what is wrong with your arm? Why do you have that cast? She was fighting off a robber. When you consider that she lives above the store, you understand just how real that is. And then, Mr. Speaker, beside healthier economy and healthy and thriving communities that we so badly need based on the values of personal responsibility and respect for business, we also need to understand our Kiwi identity. It's being said that we are going on some sort of bold trajectory where we divide New Zealand into two types of people. On the one hand, tangata whenua, here by right. On the other, tangata tiriti, here on some other criteria that is not clear. Mr. Speaker, through all of human history, there has never been a society that has succeeded by giving people different sets of political rights by birth. In fact, so many New Zealanders have come to escape the class system of England, the caste system of India, the one-party state of China and the apartheid of South Africa, people dreaming of an equal future. Every good political movement in 400 years, freedom of religion to believe what you want, equality between the sexes, equality between races, equality based on people's sexuality. Every good political movement has been about the simple idea that each human is born with the same basic rights. That is the way to address genuine challenges such as poverty and a lack of opportunity and education and health and welfare and housing that we badly need to do. But if we divide our country into an ethno-state with different sets of political rights, depending on who your grandparents are, not only will we not achieve that, we will create a level of division and despair in this country that cannot be imagined in New Zealand as it currently conceives itself. And that is why we will be advocating, alongside a healthier economy, with less government waste, less strangling regulation, and more respect for people who get up to make a difference in their own lives, along with healthier communities based on social services that really work with the premise of personal responsibility and the simple idea that people actually can make a difference in their own lives. We will also be advocating for New Zealand to be a modern, outward-looking, multi-ethnic, liberal democracy where every child or tamariki is born with the same bundle of political rights. That is perhaps the most important debate for New Zealand's long-term future. Mr. Speaker, it is so good to have this House back. There is so much good work we can do, holding this government accountable and giving some hope of a better way forward to rebuild our country in the aftermath of COVID, or perhaps more accurately, the government's expensive, cruel and damaging, myopic, one-sided, tunnel-visioned response to it. The ACT Party is thrilled to be here and can't wait to do our best for this great country in 2022. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker. E te pika e te whare tēnā tātou. Tēnā tātou ia tātou e pōhiri nei i te tau 2022. Ka tiake, kei ko te wehi ki a ihoa o rā ngā mano, ona manakitia nei ia tātou, rotu i ngā tiri āhuatanga o te wā. E kiao, i o tātou tini mate. Ngā mate huhua o te wā, ngā mate kei runga i tēnā marae, kei runga i tēnā marae, tēnā kāinga o tātou. Hara ko taku tuahine tērā i roto i te whakatohea, kia kei, i riro tītapu, a ki te pō, i nehua i tainehi, me ngā mate huhua o te wā. Nō reira ngā mate haere whakangaro atura. Ko ki mai rā ki a tātou ngā mahuetanga iho, o ngā tua iho, a tātou e pai nei, tēnā koutou, kia ora tātou katoa. Well, as I reflect on the year that has gone, and I know many have done that, it was a big year, and it was a hard year, and it was a trying year for many. But with COVID, and with the summer period of the unknown, we are still here today, ensuring the safety of all that live here in Aotearoa. But let me bring you to a kaupapa that has been at the core of everything we have done, but at the core of our announcements in the last few days during the celebrations or the commemorations of Te Tiriti o Waitangi. The whakapapa of Te Tiriti o Waitangi needs to be and continued to be discussed and wānangad at every level of this country, from this House, where it is not evident. It is not evident in this chamber, and I see a lot of spare space on this wall where Te Tiriti o Waitangi should be evident and it should guide the discussions of this House. Te whakapapa o Te Tiriti o Waitangi Article 1, as I have said before, consented to custodianship of the Crown. Article 2, consented to kāwanatanga and to maintain rangatiratanga over our whenua, our awa, our moana, our people and our domains. Article 3 was to be treated as equals. Māori have been good partners through Te Tiriti o Waitangi for the last 182 years. We have consented to kāwanatanga and we have upheld our part of the deal. Rangatiratanga has not been upheld. The Crown has not honoured the treaty and we continue to fight for the equal rights of Māori to participate in our country's democracy. We talked about divorcing the Queen. This Waitangi Rei Te Pāti Māori announced the removal of the British Crown and the royal family as head of state and move Aotearoa to a Tiriti-centric Aotearoa. Now, if you look at it as a marriage, tangata whenua went into a marriage with the Crown and they begat a child called Te Tiriti o Waitangi. Just because the divorce happens doesn't mean the child still doesn't exist. And so what we are calling for is to relinquish the Crown as head of state of Aotearoa, but to allow Te Tiriti o Waitangi to guide us to create a Tiriti-centric Aotearoa between tangata whenua and, like David Seymour said in his speech, and I heard him supporting this, is that we have tangata tiriti sit in their rightful place to be able to make equal decisions for the well-being of our country. So just because the divorce happens doesn't mean the child still doesn't exist. And so it is time for an adult and a mature conversation to herald the dawn of a new union, a marriage of equality between tangata whenua and tangata tiriti, to create a true Aotearoa, an Aotearoa our tipuna envisaged and consented to, a tiriti-centric Aotearoa. Our vision is not reform, because reform is a sugar-coated mechanism to be better servants to the system. As we work towards equality, let's not confuse diversity and inclusion with equality, because it usually shows up with an obsession with numbers. How many Māori are in the photo? Have we met our 20% Māori quota? How many Māori are in cabinet? All we are seeing is chocolate sprinkles put over a vanilla cake. The cake is still vanilla. Our mana motuhake policy is a reconciliation of our Indigenous truth and our re-indigenisation of our collectivism as tangata whenua. Our mana motuhake policy is the revolutionary transformation of who we are as mana whenua of this nation, as tuakana of this nation. The establishment of a Māori Parliament is critical to our constitutional transformation. The implementation of Matike Mai recommendations is also part of their policy. The overhaul of the treaty settlement process and to return land to whānau, hapu and iwi by ensuring the private and local government land is returned to mana whenua, introducing a first right of refusal policy. And I thank the Greens for supporting this part of our policy, because it means we are in agreement with this particular policy in our mana motuhake endeavours. We want to return conservation land in the dock estate to whānau, hapu and iwi Māori. Land back must become a reality for tino rangatiratanga to be achieved. We must commit to restore our environment and tackle the climate change crisis, and I look forward to the invitation by the Greens co-leader to have those discussions, by allowing mātauranga Māori to lead the way. Only Indigenous knowledge will save this planet, because science hasn't. There is a new generation on the rise, Mr. Speaker. You have the baby boomers. You have Gen Y, Gen Z, the millennials. I have dubbed this next generation as Gen T, Generation Tiriti. They are intelligent, they are strategic, and they are in tune. And dare I say it, they are woke. We are here to dismantle, and they are here to dismantle the system. and I am here for it. Our mahi for the year ahead. In 2022, we will continue to be the unapologetic Māori voice for a tiriti-centric Aotearoa and be a continued powerhouse in opposition. Just last month, we supported the call for musicians, artists, and creatives who had the rug pulled from under them with the sudden cancellation of events. Thankfully, the government listened and has now fronted up with more support. This once again shows the power of Te Pāti Māori voice on the crossbenches, and that even more Te Pāti Māori MPs next term, and I believe we're the kryptonite everybody's talking about, will lead to even more wins for our people. Our people expect and deserve liberated representatives who will be unashamedly Māori, always, who will not bow down to the crown, who do not suffer cognitive dissonance where our actions conflict with our values, who do not... this year, we will continue as we've begun. Widening inequality, we will continue to elevate the voices of Te Pani me te Rawakore and fight against inequalities and the widening inequality that this country has seen. COVID has not only highlighted the injustices in society, but made it far worse. As economist Bernard Hickey has reported, the government's COVID policies made the rich $952 billion richer, while the poor have been forced with a $400 million further in debt to the government itself. The poor now need more than twice as many food parcels as before COVID. As prices continue to rise much faster than wages, it is Māori, as always, who bear the brunt of capitalism's failures. This is clear. We're looking at the housing market. We are seeing the biggest wealth transfer in generations, from hard-working whānau to greedy property developers and landlords. Since 1986, the number of Māori forced to rent has increased by 88.3%. 70% of Māori cannot afford homes and are living in rentals. 1/3 of Māori live in houses considered damp and or overcrowded. Māori make up 50% of the waiting list for social housing. 30% of Māori pay rent that is over 30% of their weekly income. And 33% of Māori will shift residence every 3 years. At the same time, there were 191,646 unoccupied houses on census night in 2018. 38,000 of those ghost houses were in Auckland. At least 12,000 tangata whenua are homeless in their homeland. This is one of the most significant treaty breaches of today. We have created a generation of renters and we are holding them hostage with the very real prospect of homelessness. Te Pāti Māori will continue to push for bold solutions to the housing crisis, including taxing unearned wealth through capital gains and a ghost house tax. We will massively increase the construction of state houses while enabling papakainga housing at scale through regular reforms and increased investment, and stop all sales of freehold land to offshore foreign interest. My member's bill on electoral law overhaul needs this House to support all the recommendations. If we do not, we fall short. We need a fair electoral system that does not limit and suppress Māori participation. Our electoral law is archaic, it's discriminatory, and it's racist. There are only two opportunities for Māori to choose the electoral rolls, either at the time of initial enrolment or during the Māori electoral option period, which was the last time in 2018. So if you wanted to change in the election for 2020, you couldn't, because your next option is 2024. So you missed the next election in 2023. And so you participate on the roll of your choice in 2026. This is no accident. The barriers in place are calculated to lock tangata whenua out from fully participating in this country's democracy. The system is designed to disenfranchise Māori voters and lock us out. My member's bill is to remove these the racism that locks our people out of their right to change roles for up to 8 years. It's an 8-year lockout. Specifically, the bill will allow Māori to change between the Māori and general roles at any time, to change the requirement to redraw electoral boundaries to set date 2 years after each general election, set a legislative requirement that if somebody stipulates they are Māori, when enrolling, but doesn't choose an electoral roll, they are automatically placed on the Māori roll. Change the name of the general electoral district to non-Māori electoral district, because you've got the Māori roll, the general roll, and then the general election. It doesn't make sense. I am encouraging all my fellow MPs to support this bill. Supporting is consciously choosing to actively participate in a tiriti-centric Aotearoa, recognising the mana of the treaty that our ancestors signed together. If not, then we choose to continue to discriminate against tangata whenua, and you choose to uphold this blatantly racist legislation. Seabed mining is another one of our members' bills. The Party Māori will also continue to assert the kaitiakitanga of tangata whenua and for the restoration of our whenua, moana e taiao. The other Te Pāti Māori members' bill, Debbie Ngarewa Peka in the ballot, Prohibition on Seabed Mining Legislation Amendment Bill, which would ban seabed mining in Aotearoa. Debbie's Ngāti Ruanui and the iwi of Te Tai Hauauru have been fighting for years against the greed of international corporates who would destroy our moana and offshore profits. They follow in the proud tradition of whānau hapu and iwi across Aotearoa, who have fought against the pollution of our taiao and the desecration of our whenua taurikura. Such as the whānau Apunui, my own people. I stood on the front lines of the protest that worked to get Petrobras out of the Raukumara. Ngāti Ruanui have won in the courts time and time again, including in the Supreme Court in September of last year, and we are very proud of that. It's now time for the government to follow the president of the courts and to do what's right. Adopt Debbie's bill, and ban seabed mining in Aotearoa, and while they're at it, onshore drilling and fracking too. We are entirely focused on advancing the aspirations of our people because we are the true Indigenous political voice and movement in this House. We will continue to support bills that do that and oppose policies that harm our people, regardless of who puts them forward. Nō reira, he te iwi Māori kia kaha te tātou e hikama. We must continue to be the protectors and the projectors of our Indigenous voice. We must continue to be the unapologetic Māori voice for our liberation. And we must continue to re-indigenize our world for the sake of our whenua, our moana, our mokopuna, and our future. Why? Because we are magic. Nō reira hikama, ka nui o ku kōrero mo tēnei wā, tēnā koutou, kia ora tātou katoa.